Hi, friends. I'm Emily Lay, and you're listening to the Simplified podcast. If you're looking for a soft place where you can filter out the noise and the hustle, this is it. You're in the right place. Every week, I pop into your ears and invite you to slow down and join me to explore practical ways to organize and automate the complicated parts of life so you can focus on what truly matters most. We are gearing up for the new year here at Simplified, so we have a special offer for you. You can save 20% on your 2022 Signature Simplified Planner over at emilylay.com with code NEWYEAR. Make sure to get yours before they're gone. Well, hi again. Welcome back to our super special Simplifying 2022 bonus series here on the podcast. The week between Christmas and New Year's has always been one of my favorite times of the year. Things are always a bit slower and sweeter, and there's a bunch of great leftovers in the fridge, which is never a bad thing. Since this time of year is pretty unstructured for a lot of us, we have a bit more breathing room to break out our planners and think through how exactly we want to fill our pages with things that'll help us learn and grow in the coming year. Here's the thing. I'm a pretty big advocate of changes that are slow, small, and doable. I know myself. I know that when I make my mind up about something, I will go all in at 150%, and if I'm not careful about how I spend my time and energy, I'll burn out like a dying star. And that's not how I want to start my year. I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up to grow in small, intentional, and manageable ways. Despite all the messages this time of year telling us that we need to make huge, sweeping changes in order for our changes to matter, I'm going to give that a big old nope. On the last episode, we talked about how to plan for your best year yet. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go ahead and flip over there and come back to this one so you can have some context for what we're going to talk about today. But one of the big things we talked about in order to plan for a year with intention is to name what matters most to you, and then do those things and forget about the rest. That's not the first time you've heard me talk about this idea of naming what matters most and forgetting the rest. You've definitely heard it in other places too. Some people call it finding your why. But when I say name what matters most, here's what that means to me. Naming what matters most is defining what you need to care for yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's just that simple. So how do you name what matters most? Sometimes defining what we need to care for ourselves doesn't feel all that simple. I think that's because so many of us, especially women, have been trained to think about what everyone else needs way before we care for ourselves. It doesn't even occur to us to consider what we need to thrive. If you're having a hard time figuring out what matters most to you, try asking yourself these questions. They might help you pinpoint exactly what you need to care for yourself well. Try thinking through things like, who or what makes me feel alive? What makes me feel unsafe or scared? What kind of foods make me feel strong and able to tackle my day? How much sleep do I need to feel my best? In what ways do I enjoy moving my body? Who makes me feel cared for? Which connections and relationships help me feel and practice love and belonging? What kind of work makes me feel like I am filled with purpose? Which causes do I care about the most? How much margin do I need to function as my happiest and most content self? Then, out of all these answers, try and see if you can name the top 3 things that matter to you the most. Now, I know that was a pretty long list, so I'll put these questions in the show notes on my website at emilylay.com/podcast so you can go back and review them. But I know exactly what matters most to me right now, my family. Over the years, knowing that my family is my top priority has guided me through some of the smallest and biggest decisions I've made for my life, and Brian and I have made together for our family. That's why naming what matters is so important, because having that guiding principle really does make everything so much simpler. And let's remember, your answer may shift with your season. Let me just say, what matters to you right now will definitely shift and change over the course of your life. And that's completely okay. I've seen this firsthand in my own life. Up until the twins were born, I had been balancing being Brady's mom, Brian's wife, and the head of Simplified pretty well. At the time, I would have told you that I had 2 priorities, having a joyful family and a successful career. And you know what? That's what I had. and everything was going great until it was not. I had a family of 3 little ones under 6 who were growing like weeds, and a business that I was so thankful to see was growing so well. And each of these things kept growing. They got bigger and more complex and bigger and more complex. I mean, of course they did. But there was one problem. I, as a human, only had so much time and brain space. And each of my children and my business demanded so much of each. Too much, actually. More than I had to give. And I was petrified. Sometimes in your life, I bet you found yourself here too. As our seasons shift, so do our responsibilities and capacities for work and rest and joy. And if we're not careful, we may be adding more than we can take onto our plates. We have too many things that matter. And when that happens, our health starts to suffer, our relationships suffer, and all of a sudden we find that our empathy has run out. And in order to survive, our bodies shut down emotionally due to overwhelm. Nothing gets in, not any stressful stuff, but also none of the good stuff either. That's what burnout does to us. It takes away our capacity to feel anything, including joy. And this is where we stay until we decide to make some changes. When I hit that moment of burnout, I knew I had to ask myself, what matters to me right now in this particular season? And my answer made me redefine what success looked like for me. One night, sitting in a puddle of tears, literally, I realized it was time for me to address my competing priorities. Right then, right there, it was time to stop pushing myself so hard. I had to stop living with a jam-packed schedule and constantly chasing the next achievement, because achievement didn't matter to me nearly as much as my family did. So Brian and I redefined what success for our family looked like. For us, it became less about financial goals and more about time well spent. We vowed to slow down and to embrace the season of life we were in with 3 kids under 6. That meant more trips to the park, more family walks outside, and fewer scheduled appointments on our calendars. We also made our personal health a priority. We placed our marriage, our physical health, and our individual connections with our kids above everything. I cut back a lot of my entrepreneurial endeavors, and I signed up to be Brady's room mom for his class at school. I started turning down good work opportunities, not because I had scheduling conflicts, but because my mind and heart needed breathing room. I needed space in my life so I could remember how to be inspired, to accept the random playdate invitation, and to write those handwritten thank you notes for work. That stuff is so important to me. Saying no to commitments simply to give myself breathing room in my life changed everything for me. And it only happened when I remembered to ask myself, what matters to me right now in this season? And I realized my answer had changed. Don't forget, you don't have to wait until the new year to redefine what's most important to you. I had my redefine success moment in the middle of the year, and I hope you feel the agency to enact that kind of change whenever you need it. But right now, I invite you to think about what makes you feel loved and cared for and safe, because those things really do matter the most and will be the arrow pointing you toward the people and practices that will help you find meaning and purpose. Also, your list of what matters to you won't look like anybody else's list. It's not going to look like your mom's list, your mother-in-law's list, your best friend's list, or even your partner's list, and that is okay. You are allowed to have needs and priorities that are uniquely your own, because there is only one unique and beautiful you. As we close out this episode, I would like to say a blessing for you as we leave this time together and get back into our days. I hope you remember to embrace the people and moments that help you care for yourself well. I hope you remember to trust your knowing, that voice inside you whispering, "Let me take care of you." And I hope you remember to let go of the things that don't matter so you can say yes to more things that do. As always, I like to leave a little tip to help you put what we talked about today into practice. So here's what I want you to do today. When this episode is over, I want you to take 10 minutes and think about those questions I asked you a bit earlier about which people and practices help you care for yourself the most. You don't have to make this list anywhere fancy. Maybe do it in the Notes app on your phone. Just do what I call a brain dump and let your thoughts flow out of you. Then see if you can see which relationships and causes and commitments matter most to you. and keep those in mind as you start to fill the pages of the upcoming year. Thank you for listening to the Simplified podcast. I hope today's episode helps you put your arms around the things that really matter in your life. You can find show notes for this episode at emilylay.com/podcast, where you can check out links and resources I mentioned here, and you can shop the Simplified brand of planners and products. And don't forget, you can save 20% on your 2022 Simplified planner right now. Just use code NEWYEAR. Plus, for more simplicity tips, you can find me on Instagram at emilylay and at Simplified. If you're loving this show, then I bet you might like my latest book called Growing Boldly, Dare to Build a Life You Love, which is in stores right now wherever you buy books. Okay, last thing, I love bringing you this show each week. If you're loving it as much as I do, would you do me a quick favor? Would you go over to your podcast provider and rate the show or even leave a review? This is a small thing that helps our show in really, really big ways. It tells your podcast provider to put this show in the hands of more listeners who might enjoy some of these helpful tips and tricks too. I really appreciate your help. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye.